The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
From backyards to Parliament Hill, tomorrow there will be fireworks. But excitement for the pyrotechnics is not universal. Tonight we'll debate the fun and not so fun of fireworks. Then Steve talks to Ricardo Tranjan about his new book, The Tenant Class, and why he says the housing crisis isn't what you think. Also, from freedom of information in Canada to whether the Raptors can win again, we've got the Agenda's Weekend Review. It's Friday, June 30th, and that's all ahead on the agenda. While many people absolutely can't wait for events such as Canada Day fireworks displays, others wish they'd never been invented. That's led some communities in Ontario to further restrict and even ban personal fireworks. With us for both perspectives, Gurpratap Singh Toor, Regional Councillor for Wards 9 and 10 for City of Brampton, and Aleem Kanji, Chief Advocacy Officer for the Canadian National Fireworks Association. Hi to you both.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to an explosive debate. Get it? I'm glad you laughed.
Good at that.
Mom jokes.
We'll keep the sparks to a minimum.
But I'm looking forward to this because obviously the both of you have very different perspectives on this, and a lot of people around the province are having this conversation. Gurpratap, I wanted to start with you. Yeah. Why did Brampton City Council ban fireworks?
In the past years or past councils, we've seen, talks and debate about limiting and restricting uses of fireworks, solutions that weren't really fully enforceable. And, post-pandemic, we see a lot of celebrations, a lot of people come out, a lot of parties, a lot of weddings, a lot of celebrations in general. And last summer was one of our wildest, I would say, in terms of fireworks. In the city, we only allowed 4 days of fireworks. Legally, you were allowed to do fireworks on 4 different occasions. But throughout the summer, we saw fireworks from Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sunday, maybe Monday or Tuesday were the rarest days you couldn't see fireworks. But we had a lot of fireworks going off in our city, and that's something that we consistently heard throughout the summer. That's when I was campaigning. And so when we came in, New Year's, we got sworn in November, and New Year's was the next opportunity that we knew people would be doing fireworks, and that's the day that we typically allowed people to do fireworks. So we decided to take the bold action and say enough is enough, and we decided to ban personal use fireworks in the city.
Well, you say it's a bold action to do this, and I think with fireworks, I think a lot of us kind of, when we hear fireworks or see fireworks, we're celebrating something, but they're also very noisy. What types of fireworks are banned in Brampton?
So all personal use fireworks, any fireworks that you could have set off from your personal property, they're all banned.
So, but if the city does an event, they have those fireworks.
So the city has their own fireworks display on Canada Day, on New Year's, and now for the first time we'll have one on Diwali as well. But those are city-led, professionally done with pyrotechnics and all the safeguards in place. Those are the only fireworks that are allowed in City of Brampton now.
Aleem, I saw you wanting to get in on what we were just talking about. What is the Canadian National Fireworks Association's position on fireworks ban?
Sure. Let's talk about that. And we can certainly talk about Brampton as well. The Canadian National Fireworks Association, just by background to your viewers, represents over 3,000 manufacturers, vendors, people that are in the business of selling fireworks, the very legal and permissible product set of over 4,000 fireworks that are approved, tested strenuously by our federal government, implemented and regulated by fire codes across the country amongst fire chiefs and in municipalities. And our position is that the very legal industry of fireworks should continue to be used. Brampton, in fact, before the councillor mentioned the bold action that they made, and of course there was no public consultation. It was 3 weeks into his term of office.
But he said he heard this concern at the doors.
Sure, during the doors, during a campaign. But he gets elected, and they do this 3 weeks after coming into office. So there was no public consult. In fact, there were about 23 people that showed up on the 28th of November in 2022, all forcefully speaking of why we should have this. Cultural reasons, I know we'll get to that later. And there wasn't one question asked by any member of council as to why the community actually wants to keep it in place. And so our position has always been to use the product safely and respectively. We're very proud of our Be a Good Neighbor program. I'll show that to your viewers. That reminds people to use the product safely, prepare ahead of time, respect your community, your environment. And we were very proud to launch the campaign exclusively in Brampton in Punjabi. The challenge is, as the councillor said, in the very bold action that they took, you can't ban things that are legal. You make it more enticing to do it. And by banning things that are legal, you're enticing and you're actually supporting an illegal underground black market by doing that. You can't have things that are legal where people can simply buy online. We saw a lot of that during the pandemic. And also, what people can do is they can hop over to Toronto, they can go to Mississauga. They don't even have to leave their home. As I said, Brampton is a center, as we saw during the pandemic, for logistics, transportation. And there are a lot of people that work in the trucking industry in Brampton. Those people, those men and women that kept us alive during the pandemic transporting our goods, they also transport fireworks. That is now illegal in Brampton.
Well, you've used the word legal a couple of times.
I have.
So I wanted to get the councillor to respond.
Yeah, it's only legal until it's not. And, in the city of Brampton now, the use and sale of these fireworks is considered illegal.
But I think the point you're trying to make is that it's legal federally?
It is a federally legal set of 4,000 products.
So you're saying that the city of
federal,
Brampton is not in the position to ban it?
The city of Brampton has made their decision on the sale and use of it, and I'm happy to talk about enforcement and how that's not possible.
Let me ask the councillor first. How do you enforce the ban?
So, and that's the key piece here that we're not speaking about is the enforcement. So before, I took office, we had certain rules and restrictions that I believe previous councils had worked with the Fireworks Association to set in place that, if there's fireworks that travel more than 3 meters or 10 feet, those are considered illegal. There's talks around it, but you can imagine how difficult it is to enforce that. If I'm a bylaw officer, I got a complaint that, hey, this house is setting off fireworks. I show up to the property. How am I to determine if it's traveled more than 3 meters or not? How am I to determine those things? And then, the sale of fireworks is still, again, the question that although it was illegal to sell, fireworks that are longer than 3 meters in distance, but then at the same store you see them selling fireworks that are legal, fireworks that are illegal. There's so many of these questions, and it's so difficult to enforce that with a blanket ban, simply now that any fireworks, you can go and issue a ticket.
Well, he mentioned that you can get it on the black market, so
you can buy them online.
Yes.
And this 3 meter rule that councillor mentions, for everyone to know, this was the only city in Canada that imposed a rule of fireworks that are 3 meters or less. So the fireworks that are used, it would basically amount to sparklers on birthday cakes that could be used. When they had the 3 meter rule or less, which is now a blanket ban, which basically means when they had the 3 meter rule in place, you're allowed to use sparklers on birthday cakes, which now, because of a blanket ban, are completely illegal. The enforcement capabilities, as the councillor said to the chamber, are woeful. They are in need of improvement. And so how is this enforced?
Well, what's the point of banning it if you can't enforce it, councillor?
Great question.
But now we're able to enforce it because with the ban in place now, the amount of complaints that we get, our officers are able to go and address those complaints. But also with the ban, the news that it's generated, people realize now there is a ban in place. People realize the use of fireworks is illegal. So, it's usually, like we spoke about it earlier, it's usually family celebrations. You go out, you buy fireworks. Now when you know those are illegal, as a family or as the head of the family or the person that's going out to purchase these fireworks, you make that decision to set an example for your kids that, hey, what we're gonna do now is illegal. We hope nobody complains. That kind of behavior starts to get curbed.
Couldn't you do that through education, though?
That's right.
Before banning?
Absolutely, we could. And I think that's what the previous terms have tried to do, but I don't think that's resulted in much. When we talk about education, we talk about the Fireworks Association. Unless you're a member of council or somebody present at, in our council chambers, you don't really hear about the association. You don't hear about the good work that they do. But on the ground, the average resident, they don't know about these rules and regulations. For them, it's as simple as, let me go to the plaza, I know a vendor, set up a tent, I can go buy fireworks for my kids, I'm gonna buy those, come back home and set them off. Rules, they don't know about them.
I think that's a bit unfair. Listen, the Fireworks Association is proud to attend the Association of Municipalities of Ontario Conference, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference. We work with cities across this country, including Brampton. We work with fire chiefs. We work with bylaw enforcement officers. But I want to address a couple of points that the councillor made. He talked about the previous administration, and I think it's a really interesting point because this councillor actually sat in the office of the former mayor in the previous administration, where there wasn't a ban. So I don't know what's changed, but let's go through
he mentioned the pandemic.
Let's go through some numbers.
I was a staffer and now I'm a politician.
That's right.
It's very two different things.
Well, you know,
you're
looking at things differently.
On that point, though, Aleem, I would say that nobody pays me to lobby for this. These are my residents.
Is that a dig at Aleem because he's part of the association?
But what they pay you for is to represent your residents. If it's a dig at my career, I'm
just talking about the same thing, that they're representing an association, Aleem's representing the association and speaking for fireworks. We're talking about why we don't want fireworks in our city. But when we talk about that question, and Aleem brought a good point about, delegations and people that we've heard from, and like I've told you, I've heard from people at the doors. I've heard from seniors. We've had the Seniors Association come and delegate about this and tell us how good this is. They represent over 40 seniors clubs across the city. So that's a loud voice that we can't ignore. I've heard from parents that have children with disabilities, that have children with accessibility needs, that used to plan to leave the city on certain days when they knew there was going to be fireworks like Canada Day, like New Year's. They would leave and get a hotel somewhere more remote where their child could be safe. They're very happy about this too because they've seen a reduction in the use of fireworks. People that are pet owners that have dogs and cats.
Well, I'm
glad
you let me.
Makes a big difference to them.
I'm glad you brought that up because fireworks are often criticized for being bad for the environment. We were just talking before we started taping. We just started talking about how heavy the air is.
Quality.
It's terrible.
If I could just add on to that as well.
Yes, let me just finish the question because I also want to get Aleem in.
Thank you.
Given our air quality issues from wildfire smoke, is celebrating fireworks this weekend a good idea?
I'd like to address the issues on the numbers first before we get to the environment. Here's the reality. This is the 9th largest city in our country with 800,000 people. Let me get to some numbers. Okay, in 2022, there were 1,184 complaints around fireworks. Only 10% were given out fines, okay? In 2021, 785 complaints around fireworks. Let's talk numbers. There were 16,000 total complaints in all areas in Brampton in 2021.
Where are these numbers from, sir?
This is from the city's own bylaw, head of bylaw enforcement. These are public numbers. 22% of all complaints were attributed to loud music and parties. I repeat, 5% were fireworks. Do we go after loud parties and music next? Should we ban maybe Punjabi folk music next?
And we do.
No, you don't ban Punjabi folk music.
No, we don't.
You don't.
No, I said loud music is what you're talking about.
You can't ban loud music.
And that's what we're working towards right now as well. Again, our noise bylaws, as we speak, are being amended for loud noise, whether it's coming from music at parties, whether it's coming from neighborhood. We are, sir. And whether it's coming from loud cars, we're working with the Peel Regional Police on this issue, and we've had that request from the Peel Regional Police to have certain parameters in place we can enforce.
Not banning.
And we are.
No, you're not banning.
Well, I know there's.
I don't believe you watched the council meeting just Wednesday. I was at the meeting.
Did the Peel Police say they want to ban music? Did the Peel Police say they want to ban fireworks?
We have to talk about the environment because I think this is something that's not top of mind for a lot of people. And one of the other criticism is that fireworks impact kids, as you mentioned, wildlife, people who have lived in war zones. I was born in during the Civil War, lived in a refugee camp. So sometimes when I hear fireworks, but I also understand that I'm part of a bigger community. So something I like, my neighbor might not like, and that's fine. So let's talk about the environment.
For sure, let's talk about that. An average consumer fireworks show, and we know this. We've worked with Dr. Tom Smith, who's a chemist from Oxford University, to quantify these these parameters. There's a lot of hyperbole around the environment. We've actually done the work, and we've done the numbers. Let me share them with you. An average consumer fireworks show is less than $500, and the CO2 footprint is 0.625 kilograms of CO2. The councillor's car ride, which is about an hour getting here from Brampton today, was 19 kilograms of CO2. So if we're going to talk about CO2 emissions, let's look at things holistically. Let's look at a propane gas tank that we're all going to be using during Canada Day, making burgers and enjoying our country, 2.4 kilograms per hour. There are impacts, of course there are, but how many people are we bringing together? 30,000 people will be on Parliament Hill this week celebrating and looking at fireworks. And so I think we need to look at things holistically. I think when government comes forward and says that we will decide, as Brampton has, to ban, but we will have our own events for you. We don't trust the public. There's a lot of cultural appropriation going on here because this is a city with heavy South Asian population. Of the 800,000, how many people checked into hotel rooms? That's the question for the councillor.
Do you think it's unfairly targeting
Of course
South
it
Asian
is,
communities?
100%.
Well, councillor?
Somebody from the community, I would say it is not.
800,000 people.
As
How many
somebody
people?
from the community, I would say it is not targeting our communities. But just to go back to the numbers that Aleem was quoting here, this is like saying that, does this make any difference to our environment? In an environment like this, in the air quality like this, when we set off fireworks, like having this discussion with this kind of air quality, we only make it worse. Quoting numbers on how much CO2 emissions from this and from that, that's like me saying that,
These
hey,
are facts,
let's
Councillor.
stop turning off, we were always educated as kids, turn off your lights when you're not using them because you're making a difference to combat climate change. This is like saying, well, that's a tiny difference and we don't really need to do it if the big industries are continuing to pollute our environment, if the oil and gas is continuing to contribute to the climate crisis. At a personal level, we don't need to do it because it's a very small difference.
Completely unfair and not true.
That's just like, data like that is just so...
These are facts. There is no data
These
behind.
are facts.
These are facts.
I agree with the facts.
Good.
All right. Well, let's agree to disagree. We only have a few more minutes, and I want to talk about maybe some solutions, some alternatives. The Summer Solstice Festival in Ottawa did a drone light show for Indigenous Peoples Day. We have a tweet showing that here. It says, in celebration of #NIPD 2023, 200 drones lit up the sky. Madawake farm on #NIPD 2023, sharing an intimate story, Mewaze, with drones. And you can see the lights from the drones in the accompanying picture. Is this something that could be an alternative to fireworks?
I believe so. Mississauga is doing the same right now for Canada Day celebrations. They have a company, it's a private company, private business that's doing a display with LED drones.
And they will be having a full fireworks show in Mississauga. Mississauga will not be following their cousins.
I can only hear one person at one time. Let the councillor finish, and then I'll come to you.
They won't be banning either.
This is like saying that, we get it, there's more electric cars coming in the market. Let's completely ban cars that are running on gas and completely go electric. You need a transition. Mississauga is a great example of a city where they're having these light displays, private companies choosing to do so. Maybe our council, maybe our city will, reach out to a company like that and say, hey, would you like to host something like this in Brampton? And it'll take a cultural shift. It doesn't happen overnight. As kids grow up, as they get more attracted by these the light shows that are done by the drones, the different imagery that they show, very creative. If we start leaning towards that, I would be very happy to one day say that, hey, even the city won't host any fireworks. We will do, light drones and these kind of displays as we start shifting towards that.
We proudly have drone folks as part of the association, the Fireworks Association. There is time and space for that. I think the councillor needs to remember that Brampton's on a flight path as well, and there are communities around the world that don't use drones because of that. We also have new Canadians coming to our country from places like the Ukraine and Russia, where drones are actively used in warfare, where residents are saying that the sound of the drones is creating an issue for them. We need to look at things holistically. We can't just say we're going to ban. As it relates to Mississauga, you will be seeing very shortly that they are going to take the opposite direction of their cousins in Brampton because they trust the public. They know that regulations speak to how people should work. We're coming out of a of a pandemic where there were severe restrictions imposed for many people. And the public has no tolerance for being told what they can do and what they can't, particularly on legal products. It's not the way we should govern ourselves as a society and in this beautiful country that we're about to celebrate.
I have a quick follow-up with you.
Please.
You mentioned that the drones might be might cause some PTSD for people from like Ukraine. Fireworks also have that same criticism.
They do, but this is
Exactly.
the balance that we need. We don't go and just ban something to say that some people have an issue. We're proud to work with the SPCAs of the world to say that when there are fireworks shows, keep your pet indoors. We don't tell people to go check into a hotel, right? We don't listen to that. We say, and we follow the advice, and we say to keep your pets when you hear a vacuum cleaner or a loud Honda Civic, right? We had 41,000 complaints on parking last year in Brampton, compared to 1,500 for fireworks. Do we ban cars?
We only have a few minutes left. Would you consider taking this ban to court?
There are active attorneys. This is the first time the councillors looked at me, by the way, in the interview when you asked the question.
No, he's looked at you a few times.
We could replay. Aline could go back and watch the interview again. I've been looking at you.
You know what? 30 of us looked at the council when we deputed on the 20th of November. I'll repeat, not one question was asked to any deputy in support of fireworks. Can lawsuits be used? Sure they can. That's getting heavy-handed. I think there are solutions here. I think through our Be a Good Neighbor program, through instructions on fireworks that give QR codes that tell people how to use the product responsibly, that's the solution. You know, banning things from the public inherently, elected officials are telling the public, we do not trust you. And I'd be willing to have this conversation with you after Diwali to show that the ban simply does not work. And they're going to find that out very soon.
Councillor, I'll let you have last word.
That sounds more like a challenge that, hey, we're going to come to your city and we're going to do a lot of fireworks and we're going to show you.
I said your band's
It
not
does sound
gonna
like that, but
No, it
I would
doesn't.
also say that we keep, I keep hearing from Aline, we're coming off a pandemic, we're coming off a pandemic. That was based on respiratory illnesses. When our environment is getting to this position, I am not okay with setting off fireworks in my city, reducing the air quality. I'm not okay
Show me the
with
science that it
gas-emitting
impacts.
cars, and that's where we're moving to electric vehicles. We're the largest electric fleet when it comes to transit, when it comes to buses. We're electrifying as many facilities as we can. We're moving towards tackling climate change, adapting to this new reality, and part of that is this small piece that we're debating about today.
I'll give you 20 seconds, Aline.
I'd love to say that there's an impact or a correlation between this. There isn't, quite frankly, there isn't. And here's the reality. We are doing our part to protect the environment. We are lowering CO2 emissions as an industry. We are proudly doing that.
So electric
The
fireworks?
question is, electric fireworks, is that even real? I mean, we're talking about things that are not real.
We're going to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much for an
Doesn't exist.
explosive conversation. We appreciate it. I feel like we just scratched the surface on this, and hopefully we can revisit this conversation and have a longer discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And have a
you.
great holiday weekend.
I'm wishing everybody happy Canada Day.
Thank you.
Here's a provocative idea. What if there is no housing crisis, but rather that the market is working just as intended to make the rich richer and the working class beholden? That is the controversial thesis at the heart of Ricardo Tranjan's new book. It's called The Tenant Class. Ricardo Tranjan is a senior researcher with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and he joins us now here in studio. Hi there.
Hello.
Okay, you make the case that Canada doesn't have a housing crisis. Rather, the housing market is working exactly as intended. What does that mean?
When we talk about a crisis, we'd expect something that is shocking, that is surprising. We'd expect something that impacts everyone negatively, or most people, like COVID. Would expect everyone to be interested in solving that problem once and for all, because we don't like crisis. And nothing could be farthest from the truth when we're talking about housing in this country. It has been the same structure for the housing market and for the rental market specific for a very long time. The situation has been slowly deteriorating, but for a long time. It is not everyone that is living the negative impacts of it. It is tenants and people who are unhoused. Everyone else, they're doing quite fine. And also, in the part that I find most important, not everyone is interested in changing the status quo because some are benefiting tremendously from it.
Well, let me just understand. You think the decision makers have the system the way it is because they want to keep landlords up and tenants down?
they respond to the balance of forces and power in our society. And in our society, the real estate industry, developers, landlords, they have a lot more power to influence our policies than does the tenant class.
Okay, let's do an excerpt from your book. Sheldon, if you would, bring this up. This is from the tenant class, in which Ricardo writes, Canada's rental housing market is doing what rental markets do: extract income from working class families and transfer it to the capital-owning class. Landlords grow wealthy while tenant families experience financial insecurity, just like greedy bosses enrich on the backs of low-wage workers. The dominant housing crisis narrative is part of the problem. It exempts landlords and governments from responsibility by suggesting that excessive rents are a new and unexpected problem that requires complex technical solutions. While the experts look for those solutions, the market continues to do its thing. Okay, what is the dominant housing narrative you refer to there that you are trying to dismantle in this book?
The book tries to challenge the facile idea that supply and demand can explain everything we see in the housing market. That if we add more supply, prices will stabilize. If we add more people, prices will go up. That is only part of the story. And we know this. We have known this for a very long time.
What's the other part of the story?
The other part of the story is that supply is necessary but not sufficient. What we build, where we build, how we finance it, on whose land we build, whether we have regulations or not. That part of the story is equally important if your desired outcome is affordability. But when you get to those sets of questions, it's not simply about building. Now you get into very political questions about regulation, financing, and so on. And so that's the part of the conversation that we prefer. I like having it. I wrote the book so we can have it. But certain actors, namely developers, real estate investment trusts, and the real estate industry generally prefers not to have.
The book is called The Tenant Class. Is the tenant class everyone who's a tenant?
Yes. In my definition in the book, yes. Everyone who's a tenant, everyone who is also unhoused and who like to be a tenant, but unfortunately haven't managed to do so.
And what are some of, in your view, the myths that people believe about the tenant class?
Yes, with the book, when you kind of get out of the new classical economics and starts going into political economy, you inevitably bump into some of the cultural aspects of our system as a whole. And it was impossible not to talk about the myths and the notion that tenants are overall people who failed, essentially. If you work hard, the myth goes, and you save, you will be able to buy a house and you no longer being a tenant. That is not true. People remain tenants for a number of reasons, and they're not simply second-class rates. They also deserve to have political rights. And this conversation is important, I think, the myth conversation, is because while the middle class is constantly aspiring for home ownership, that's where politicians will go too, because they know how to read the room, and it becomes harder to talk about renter issues.
You write that landlords are sometimes mischaracterized as sort of struggling family mom-and-pop operations. What is not accurate about that?
It's two things. First, one is that small popular landlord, mom-and-pop landlord, it's only a share of the market, right? And in the book, I estimate that is about 22% would be small business owners, and there's another 30% or so would be investors. They are a share of the market, they're not all of it. The second problem is that we tend to talk about them as struggling families, not as investors. So in the book, I pick an excerpt from a news article that describes a family that decided to buy a second home to make capital gains and
have a source of income.
Have a second source of income. Things went south, and they had to sell it. But the entire story in the newspapers, and we see this often, is described as this one family is struggling, right? I rephrase that and I say, well, investors had some money set aside. They decided to go for something that is high returns and low risk, so they went into the real estate market. What happened is that business didn't go as well as they desired. They had some operational losses, but they still had capital gains that more than offset their operational losses. Why are we not talking about landlords in those terms? Why is this struggling family trying to pay their own mortgage? It mischaracterizes the situation greatly.
You also write that the most direct and sure way for tenants to gain power is to organize and mobilize and fight back. And again, what is the end game of all of that?
The end game is for tenants to be recognized as a political class and to have the right to collective bargaining. Right now, tenants have the right to organize, but they don't have any mechanisms to exert those collective
So you want them to be
rights.
more like a labor union.
Exactly. And when you look at, as the book does, at 150 years of tenant organizing in Canada, it always starts in the very local, in these small rent strikes and other collective actions. But usually, moments where there is a strong tenant movement are followed by policy changes that have positive impacts for tenants, additional protections, additional government. Funding for no-market housing, all sorts of things, right? So in a historical perspective, the tenant movement has often been successful in improving the conditions for tenants.
If you look at the whole province of Ontario, though, there are more homeowners than tenants, right? And politicians tend to go where the votes are. And homeowners vote more in disproportionate numbers to tenants as well. So how is this road to victory ever going to happen, given those circumstances?
Yes, and that's the political work that the tenant class and organized tenants needs to do. And we've seen a number of cases where they have been successful. And I will provide you a very recent example. The Enough is Enough campaign that we have now in Ontario. We had some very large demonstrations recently. It seems like Labour and others have formed a front, a united front against the Ford government. There are 5 demands. One of them is rent controls. If you think about the last 5 or 6 years, tenant issues has not been a forefront issue in the opposition against Doug Ford. But now it is one of the 5 asks in this new and seemingly large campaign. And I think that is not unrelated with the rent strikes we're seeing right now. It's not unrelated with the growth in tenant unions and the organizing that the book documents.
Let's finish up on this. You clearly have you've planted your flag with the tenant side of this argument. There is obviously the other side as well. If you demonize one side of this equation against another, how does that help us get closer to what needs to be done at the end of the day, which is a system that works for all?
Yes, I don't think I'm demonizing. I'm thinking I'm describing the reality and the day-to-day of rental market challenges. Actually, I would argue that when we do not take politics and power and social forces into account, when we pretend that this is all a technical issue, that we can bring folks like me into a room, that we think really hard and come up with a decision for it, that will just solve all the problems. I think that that's politically naive to put so much hope in technical solutions when we live in a system that is political, where land, where housing is built, is the most political thing that we can think about.
So this is a battle, and you just feel the tenants need to win the battle?
Absolutely.
All right, we got it. Ricardo Tranjan is the author of The Tenant Class. He's also a political economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and we thank him for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you for having me.
The agenda this week reflected on whether Canada is a post-national country, learned why some places here could become uninsurable, and wondered what's next for Raptors basketball. The Agenda's Week in Review begins with how hard it is to get access to public information.
Tom and I spent 20 months investigating Canada's broken Freedom of Information system.
You say broken. You're convinced it's broken.
I mean, it's worse than broken, I think, in many ways. And what is so crucial is these laws exist for a reason. This is foundation of democracy stuff. And you see someone here, just a regular person who was trying to understand why they lost their job from a public institution. And it took, I think this was 2 years, this process that was going on. And just countless amount of resources and time spent in it. I think Brooks told us, this was almost like a part-time job for him, in addition to being a doctor and saving lives.
Tom, from my understanding of things, the Freedom of Information system is something that journalists mostly use. Do journalists have an easier time getting information than civilians?
Well, first, I think I challenge you on the idea that journalists are the primary users. They're actually by far, they're a small minority of the system. Most users of the system are normal people, civilians like Brooks, and their businesses. So it's people that are looking to learn more about their government, more about, the example I keep using is, trash pickup for the city that someone lives in. Like, why isn't my trash being picked up as frequently? Why am I paying more in this obscure tax? It's people asking questions like that, or people like Brooks trying to understand what happened in this complex process, happening 12 layers up from me. So first of all, I think, certainly there's a lot of people who are using the system who are not the people that you and I think of. But when it comes to journalists, I think we all know that there are fundamental problems with the freedom of information system, or systems in Canada, because we have one for every jurisdiction, province, territory, and the feds. We all know that there are all of these hoops that you have to jump through. There's so many issues that you encounter on a daily basis trying to just learn about a briefing note, like a letter written to a minister explaining a topic. We sometimes get involved in fights that take years. Robin and I have had FOIs that have taken 3, 4, 5 years to get answers on. And of course, by the time you get those documents, it's not super interesting or useful anymore. I'm still waiting on stuff from COVID.
From COVID, so from 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, we have the Information and Privacy Commissioner here, part of whose job is to, I guess, ensure that Ontarians get access to the information that is of relevance to them. How well do you think the system works?
I think the system can certainly use drastic improvements all around, and we can get into some of those solutions later, but I think Dr. Fallis's story is a really good example of why this really matters, why it matters to Ontarians, why it matters to, to them individually, their communities. And, as Robin says, and I agree, it's the fundamental underpinning of a healthy democracy. So we can't afford for the system not to work. It has to, be fit for purpose. It has to be modernized, and it has to allow, whatever the outcome, it has to allow people like Dr. Fallis the right to exercise, the opportunity to exercise their right to access to information, and institutions a fair opportunity to respond when there are, legitimate exemptions that apply and that the law has recognized and are important to uphold as well. So. In all, I think it is fundamentally important, and I want to congratulate Robin and Tom for really bringing light to this issue.
Brooks, let me just understand from you a little more. Why was it important to you to make that freedom of information request and get the information that you were after?
So, two things. I think the first is just for myself wanting to understand what was happening in the background and understand the truth, particularly when the hospital had flipped on what they told me. I put a lot into that first year of the pandemic. I really, tried to do as much as I possibly could to impact not only within the ICU and how we were treating patients, but to try to impact how we responded, and knowing that the quality of our response was going to impact the number of people who died. So to me, to put that much into it and then to lose my job when they said, you did a great job, but we just don't like the way this fits with our image, essentially. To lose my job like that was pretty upsetting to me. So to get to the bottom of that information was important for me. But secondly, we're talking about democracy and how things run. A hospital needs to be able to stand on its own in a public healthcare system, and leaders within the hospital, doctors, nurses, other leaders need to be able to speak publicly about issues that they see in the healthcare system.
I wonder if anything's changed in the intervening months to make you slightly more optimistic about where Canada's at today.
I'd actually be sad to say significantly more pessimistic. I don't think the last 6 months have been very, very good for Canada. I think we're seeing some real sort of challenges in terms of our national integrity. This idea that there's an idea of Canada is something I grew up with in the 70s and the 80s, and sort of going through all the political turmoil of that time, and everybody was getting all excited about what is Canada and how does it work, and multiculturalism and immigration and all those kinds of things. I think we've actually got a bit of a turning point now, and the whole world is going through a lot of changes. You know, Finland's going through some of these challenges, same with Norway, same with Japan, but Canada seems to me to be particularly vulnerable to the things that we see happening. I'm not at all convinced we're going in the right direction. There's no national vision. There's not even a discussion about a national vision. Our politics at the federal and provincial level have become bribery politics. How much money can I promise? How many lower your taxes or raise your annual payments? There's not much there anymore. I don't see people in this country coming together and gelling around any kind of a central idea. Let me use one example. We've had a massive increase in immigration, which I will say has been wonderfully beneficial for Canada as a whole, really since the 1970s and even before then. Immigration is a real strength of this country. But we've increased the numbers so fast that we haven't even given much thought to it. All the people are pouring into a handful of 5 or 6 cities, and the smaller places are getting discouraged and getting left behind. And I'll end with this. I think Canada has one of the lowest costs of citizenship of any country in the world. We expect virtually nothing from our citizens. And as a consequence, our citizens feel no obligation to think about the country's future, to worry about the Maritimes, to think about what's going on in Nunavut, to be concerned about the involvement of the new Canadians in our economy and our society. We've got some real work ahead of us.
All right, let's get some feedback on that thesis. Margaret McMillan, as a Canadian with a perch in the United Kingdom, I wonder whether you see a Canada as a country without a centre and a purpose.
Well, Ken is right. We've always wondered about who we are. We've always wondered about where we're going. I do find, I come back to Canada a lot. I live part of the year in the UK and part of the year in Canada. When I come back, I would sometimes think, looking at the Canadian media, that I'm living in one of the most miserable countries in the world. We're very good at criticizing ourselves and very good at being down on ourselves. And perhaps we need to do more. We need to worry about what's wrong with us, but I think we need to do more about the things we're very good at. I mean, we are a very decent country. We have a rule of law. We certainly have divisions, but we've managed to deal with them so far in a civilized way, in a kindly way. I think, basically, I think we're well-intentioned towards each other. And I'm worried about, yes, I know we need a national purpose, but be careful what you wish for. Think of the countries that have had strong national purposes. That hasn't always been good. It has often led to diminishing the respect for the opinions of others. So I am worried about the country, perhaps not as much as Ken, but I do know that something of what he says is something that I certainly feel as well. But I also think we need to do more to look at the good sides of the country.
Paul Wells, I'd like to draw your attention to a poll that was taken last February in which the question was asked, does it feel to you like everything is broken in the country right now? And 2/3 of Canadians signed on to that. 2/3 said yes. Now, from your vantage point, is that midwinter post-pandemic blues, or is it something more?
A bit of both. I do think there's something quite substantially post-pandemic about the current malaise that is arguably gripping the country. I have been covering politics for 30 years, and I've been following it for more than 40. And I think you've almost at any point during that time, you would have been able to gather a quorum for the proposition that Canada was on the brink of disaster and richly deserved to be. When Ken says that Canada is a nation of mercenaries united by bribery, I wonder what the downside is. But I do think that perhaps more than usual, the sort of founding assumptions of the country have been called into pressing question by the continued claim of Canada's Indigenous peoples, by the suddenly very dissonant example of the United States across the border. I mean, Canadians used to think that they were more or less Americans, but maybe not quite as much. And the Trump adventure, which many Americans seem tempted to revisit and continue, has been rattling for a lot of Canadians. Add on the fact that for the last month or so, the air in most of central Canada has been essentially unbreathable. And there's a sense that not only that the current government federally is rudderless, but that the main pretender to replace that government doesn't seem to have much of a plan either. Yeah, there's cause for concern.
There are parts of this country that are uninsurable today?
Correct. As Craig was saying, 10% of Canadian homes across Canada are uninsurable for flood risk, which means they can still get home insurance, but they're not covered if they have a major flood event caused by an extreme weather event.
And the insurance companies have determined that these places are uninsurable. Why?
They've obviously done the statistics, they've run the calculations, but I believe we're actually in a very good place here in Canada because we've actually developed well-informed standards, guidelines, and tools to build a more resilient Canada. We know what to do at the level of the home and community to reduce these key physical climate risks, flooding, wildfire, and extreme heat. What we need to do is deploy them across Canada as quickly as possible to maintain that insurability and stability of the Canadian housing market.
More on that as we continue our conversation. Daniel, why don't you come in here? Tell us how you see the scene right now.
Sure. I mean, it's concerning that there are parts of the country where property is already tough to insure because of the risk of loss is high and the reconstruction costs are also rising. Insurance is a business. You know, if premiums collected by a company can't cover its payouts and expenses, it quite rationally will exit those markets. And as Craig and Catherine has said, fortunately, Canada's insurance market hasn't seen the same volatility as in the United States, but we can't be complacent. You know, climate risk is real and it's increasing and we need to manage it.
Well, since you mentioned the United States, let me give an example here from California, where apparently State Farm has recently announced that it's going to stop selling new insurance policies because of the increasing likelihood of wildfires. Okay, Craig, follow up on this if you would. Where are the places in Canada right now where the risk of wildfire is so concerning that we may be going down that road as well?
Well, we haven't really seen it in any part of the country yet. Luckily for us, wildfire is still considered an accident no matter where you live in the country. Our emergency response, frankly, has been excellent. In 2018, all of the interior of British Columbia burned, but we lost only 300 structures. You saw the response earlier this year in Nova Scotia. We're pretty good at limiting damage. So far, the country, in terms of wildfire, no particular part of the country is viewed by insurers as uninsurable now or in the near future. But, that could change.
Well, that's comforting news. But on the other hand, Daniel, do you think it's fair to say that these extreme weather events are only going to be increasing in number as we go forward?
That's certainly what's projected. We're going to see drier, warmer, wilder conditions, and we need to make sure that we're implementing all the tools that we can, as Catherine said, to make sure that we're building resilience in this changing climate.
Catherine, how much do you think homeowners understand what's going on out there right now?
I think there are there's limited information available that is up to date that can inform homeowners of what is actually going on. I think there's a great opportunity in Canada to provide more information to identify where risks are. We could have a portal where you could put in your postal code to be able to identify what the key risks are within a given community.
You don't have that yet?
We don't have that yet.
Who should do that?
I'm sure Craig could speak to that probably a little bit better, but I think this is an all-of-society approach. We need all levels of government. We need public and private partnerships. We need to be updating risk maps. So if you look at flood risk maps across Canada, they're 20 to 25 years out of date. But in my opinion, that's only one part of the puzzle. We need to identify the risks and what risks are within given regions, but we also need those resources to tell people what to do about it. Because we can't just say, well, you have a risk and do nothing about it. You need to identify those risks and what resources are available to reduce those risks.
Craig, that idea, put your postal code into a website, seems pretty simple. How come we haven't got that yet?
It's a super interesting answer. It was actually funded in the federal budget about 4 years ago. Public Safety Canada looked into it at that time, ran into issues of liability concerns, had to take a step back, and then has now reapproached it. And in the most recent federal budget, in fact, funding was announced for that exact portal. They're hoping to get it up and running over the next 2 years. They're going to start with flooding, but make sure that it can be expanded to address other risks. And Catherine is dead on. It starts with consumer awareness. It starts with Canadians being able to quickly access information about what the risk is and what they can do about it. And to answer your question, federal government obviously is the best place to take leadership, but we all have a responsibility in communicating. Whether you're a bank, a realtor, an insurer, we should all be reinforcing this information in our regular contact points with our customers.
a new head coach here. This is a photo of Darko with Raptors president Masai Ujiri. Katie, how different will he be from Nurse?
I think very different. I mean, you could go back to maybe the early days of Nurse's tenure, or even go back farther to when Nick was an assistant with the team. Again, to just touch on that developmental caliber. Darko's been a coach for almost 2 decades now. He's coached he's coached internationally. He's coached with OKC, the Memphis Grizzlies, and now Toronto. I think he's such an energetic guy. He's a bit younger. He's very relentlessly positive, which again, I feel like is something that the team just needs in spades right now. So from what we saw, like we were at his introductory presser, just like he's so excited to be here, so thrilled to be here. I think the organization setting up such an event to welcome him also shows that they're really willing to turn over a new leaf for him. And I mean, they've brought Gemma Malala back, who was with the Warriors, another developmental asset, and just like, again, relentlessly positive. But we've been around him like a relentlessly positive guy. All of this to me speaks so well for the kind of chemistry rebuild that I think the team needs right now.
You say rebuild. It's not unusual for Masai to go off the board. There were a lot of big names for head coaches this summer. He goes with someone that a lot of people are like, who's that? Obviously has the credentials there, but a lot of people digging. I'm curious, does this decision to hire Darko change sort of the direction of the team? We talk about player development, that's where he's at. Are we at instant success? Are we contending? Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, I think the Raptors are still deciding on that. I think when they look at what they have to do in free agency, that'll have a big say in terms of being able to bring back Fred VanVleet and Jakob Poeltl. But I think they wanted a coach who was comfortable going either way. And so with Darko Rajakovic's history, they probably said, hey, the team last year they didn't fulfill their potential. So if we get the vibes right, if we get the positivity back, what does this team look like? And then if they're still underperforming, then you can go from there. I think that's the way they're leaning right now. And then if it comes to it, and again, you look at Darko Rajakovic, for all the experience he has, he doesn't have head coaching experience. You look at the assistants that they've brought in, none of them have head coaching experience. And so that does leave a bit of a concern in terms of trying to win at the highest level. And so if they aren't able to get things right off the top and say, you're 20 games into the season and you only have, 7 or 8 wins, then there's going to be a lot of questions asked.
I will quickly just add that, just to push back on you a little, Nurse obviously didn't have head coaching experience at that time in the NBA. So I think the Raptors, I really like them going outside of what we would call like this insular NBA head coaching pool, which sometimes gets to feel like musical chairs a little bit when you see the same names pop up for team after team. Obviously, it can be a tried and true method. It works for some franchises, but I think it works for very established franchises, which already probably have a few superstars in place. That never hurts. So I think I like Toronto taking, it also feels disingenuous to say they're taking a chance on this guy because he's got the credentials. But I think to really turn over a new leaf in this way, I got a lot of confidence in the guy.
That's just some of what we covered this week. You can find more, including the full conversations, on our website, TVO.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda. And that's all for this Friday, June 30th, 2023.
Hey, Namshine.
Steve.
Have you seen this set here?
I have. It's nice to see you.
May I join you?
Yeah, of course you can.
So what's going on over there?
Well, this is the new set.
Hi there.
What's up, Steve? That's the new set for summer. So this summer we wanted to do something different, kind of like a summer school sort of thing. We're doing it for 6 weeks. We've invited 4 experts. I'm the 5th person. We've invited 4 experts to sit with us at the table to talk about different topics in depth. So we're talking about food, money, cosmology, architecture, and 2 more that movies, and 1 more, it will come to me. But anyway, 6 topics. And we get to just learn more about the topic itself.
Would writing be the last one?
Yes, the writer's life, because you are a writer yourself.
You have to. Well, that's not why it occurred to me.
Yeah.
It occurred to me because somebody mentioned it in my little earpiece here, so that's always a big help. Yeah. So you got 4 guests at the table, and you got a week long of shows about this.
Yeah, and we talk about different things. You know, I think sometimes when you think about the writer's life, you think it's a solitary life. So we do talk about that. But then in the States and in other places around the world, we're hearing more about book banning. So if you're a writer and you hear certain books are getting banned, does that change what you write about? What do you think about that? So we talk, you know, about the issue kind of like in a bigger picture sort of way, but also very nuanced. I learned a lot. One of the weeks we did a week on cosmology about the universe. And the whole time I'm sitting there with a group of scientists, astrophysicists, talking about what we know about the universe, only to find out that we don't know very much about the universe.
No, for sure.
And that's part of the joy of it. So I'm sitting at the table with these experts, and the whole time I'm like, what? Huh?
It's like being back in university, eh?
Yeah, it's really cool because, you know, I've always wanted to go to summer school. And the great thing about working here, it's like you're always learning new things, right? So
Every day. You come to work, learn a new thing every day.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we do this for a living, right?
What's our slogan?
Hashtag never stop learning.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So you've got 6 weeks, 6 different topics for the full week.
Yeah.
And then mid-August,
we do AMO. You and I
are hooking up.
and
That's
Jan
right.
and John Michael.
That's right.
Yep.
AM, Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And where are we meeting?
London, Ontario, my hometown.
That's right.
Yeah, so if you are in London, we will be there for AMO and looking forward to, again, learn more.
That's what we do.
Yeah, and I hope you get a chance to chill. Although chill for you is like, I don't know if you chill.
Well, so I'm not writing any books this summer, so that's a good thing.
Okay.
But, you know, there might be the odd column, the odd podcast, the odd newsletter. You can't really get away from stuff happening, right? Stuff happens.
It's true. The news never sleeps. Something like that, right? Or stops?
Something like that.
Yeah, but I hope you get to relax a little bit.
Well, the view will be better.
Yeah.
I'll be up there for a little bit on Manitoulin Island looking at the North Channel of Lake Huron, and it's a very pleasant place to work.
Well, have fun with your family, and we'll see you at AMO.
You will see me at AMO. Are you kicking me out now, or what's happening?
No, I'm being wrapped up.
Oh, okay, because I'm passing the baton off to you for the summertime.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a fun summer. And I
look
hope
forward
you
to
guys can
watching.
join us.
I look forward to watching.
Yeah.
See you, Namshine.
That's Steve Paikin. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thanks for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. Have a terrific holiday weekend, and we'll see you Monday for the start of a new season of The Agenda in the Summer. Happy Canada Day. Bye, Steve. See you soon.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.